Hello, everybody. We are live. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Taylor. Welcome to this live stream. This has been something we've been looking forward to for a few days now. My name is Mark. I'm in Athens, Greece. So it's 1:30 a.m. here. So I'm had an extra coffee and got reawakened, I guess. I took a 2-hour nap here to try to be somewhat fresh for today. So great to see a few people on here. Randy, Glenda, Debbie, welcome. And we know that a lot of other people will be watching later on their own time. How are you doing, Taylor? It's 8 or something Newfie time?
Oh yeah, it's just 8 p.m. So this is prime time for me. So I'm all good. I'm at the point where I've had all the coffees I'm going to have for today, and I'm going to go to bed when this is over. So we're on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I thought of trying to get through this without a coffee, but I chose the coffee, even though it might mean I can't get back to sleep now. So I don't know how that's going to turn out. So yeah, it's exciting to have some of your friends and others here, and we appreciate the time you're taking to join us. Let me just introduce myself real quickly here. My name's Mark. I'm the team leader at Lead 555, and we're a small but sort of crazy organization that thinks that we can make a difference in the world as we serve God, and as we really believe that God, when we take him at his word and when we follow and believe in his promises, that we can make a massive difference. So we're really excited to have Taylor joining our team. Taylor's it takes a unique person to be part of this team, and Taylor certainly fits that description in the best sense of that word. So excited to have a bit of time here to get to know Taylor and talk about a few things about her and about what she'll be doing at L5. So why don't we just dig in with a few questions here. Taylor, just for those who maybe don't know you as well as some of your better friends and myself, we want to hear a bit of just about who you are as a person, not what you're going to be doing, but who are you? Where did you start? And what makes you who you are today as a person?
Yeah, so I mean, like you already said, I'm in Newfoundland right now. That's where I am. Born and raised in a small town called Twillingate, town of about say 2,500 people. I'm right from the Bay. I grew up kind of doing all the things that people in rural areas do. You know, cod fishing, packing up wood. Going out and riding my bike to the nearest convenience store to get chips back when those things were affordable. So I grew up here with myself, and then I have 4 siblings. I had played a lot of sports in high school. Love being outdoors, love trying new things and having new experiences. And I'm trying really hard not to go into like the ministry side. It's kind of hard not to break out into that. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, it is hard because right now that's what you're living and breathing. But it's also good to sort of resist that for a couple of minutes and think that separate from this, we are somebody. You know, when we're young, God has a plan for us, and he starts to shape that just through who we are as a person. And your background is part of that. Now, at some point, you sort of, you know, your friends go a certain path, and then you start, you know, God has a path for everyone, but you start going a certain way that maybe isn't the traditional journey that a person growing up in your town would take. When did you start to feel like, okay, you're not going to go the route that the average person would go?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a small class. A lot of my classmates were friends, and a lot of my friends were not really churchgoers, at least my classmates. So I guess from a young age, I probably knew that we were going to take a different path in life, at least in terms of belief systems and how we kind of formed our thinking and those sorts of things. I did have a core group of Christian friends, and a lot of them did follow a similar path in some ways. But as I got a little bit older and as I got toward university age, and as people really began to share with me things that they felt God had kind of placed on their heart about me, and as I began to experience God for myself, I think I began to feel that maybe things were not going to work out for me in the same way that they did for many other people. Life was going to be a little bit different, and to be honest, I'm still trying to figure that part out. But I knew that maybe I didn't fit the bill of the things that maybe were expected of me as a young person growing up in small town Newfoundland.
Was that difficult for you in the sense of, oh, you're not normal and you wish you were normal, or was it more exciting? You thought, okay, I'm going to do something unique and sort of set myself apart.
I don't think it was difficult. I think especially early on, I was excited. I was excited to be leaping into things. I'm kind of the type of person that jumps and then thinks later, which fared well for me in life up to this point. I think maybe as I get older, I get a little bit more aware that my life is quite different than many of my friends and many of the people that I know. So it's as I get older that it gets a little bit harder to keep going on this path that I feel God is taking me on, because it seems to come with more risk, or at least I'm more aware of the risk now. I'm more aware of the differences. But as a kid, as a teenager, my early 20s, I just ran as hard as I could and never looked back. And now I'm a little more cautious, but it takes me a little longer to make decisions. But in any case, we're getting there.
Yeah, we start out with some youthful idealism, and then a few lessons along the way sort of sometimes dampen it. Sometimes for the better, because we become wiser and a bit more thoughtful about the things we do, a little less impulsive. But we never want to lose all of that, right? Otherwise, life can get a little bit boring, and we can sometimes limit what God wants to do with us. Was there a specific time when you felt there was a call from God, if we can call it that, a very specific, I've set you apart for something, or was it sort of something that's been part of a longer journey? It's just sort of, it went along and it sort of evolved on its own pace.
I definitely think there was a moment. I think it's progressive as well, but I think there was a big moment. I graduated grade 12. I was about to go to Memorial University, which is the university here in Newfoundland, taking some general studies courses. I think on my poster for graduation, I wrote that I wanted to be a sports doctor or sports medicine or something. And I remember being in a Sunday night service. We still did those. I know it's different than most of the world, but we were in a Sunday night service, and I just kind of, the best way I can describe it is that I kind of felt this weight on my shoulders, and there was no audible voice, nothing like that. I just felt this sense that I had to go. And that's when I said to my older sister, I said, I have to go. And she knew when I said that I meant I have to go to Bible college. And unlike a lot of people, I think maybe they feel a distinct path. It's almost as if some people, from the moment they're called, they know that it's to a lifetime of, pastoring, or a lifetime of missionary work, or a lifetime of, being in a Christian business person, or whatever the case might be. For me, it was just, you need to go to Bible college. So much so that I didn't even really know what program I should take. And youth ministry looked cool. So I picked that one. But in reality, I just felt that sense that I should go. And that was the first step, and the rest kind of unfolded after that.
Yeah, one of the things that we teach at L555 in our training is, in fact, we start with this, is the importance of having this unconditional relationship with our Father in heaven. Because we're in our catalytic leadership training, which you're going to be a part of, in helping train other younger leaders, we're calling them to something that is radical, that is different than a typical leadership where you get a title and a position and a salary and you sort of get recognized. and often celebrated as a leader. You're up front and you sort of feed off of that. The kind of leadership we're calling people to is different than that, the kind that is willing to fade in the background and push other people to the front. And the only way to do that without destroying your identity and your self-worth is to have an unconditional relationship with your Father in heaven. You're the child of the Father, and there's nothing you can do about it. He loves you, and you always will be. And I think that it's these early life experiences, these formative times, when God has his eyes on us, he's doing those things. He's preparing us for that kind of relationship with himself, so that we can then be free to do what he really wants us to do, regardless of how it impacts us in a sense, or our identity in the future, because our identity is always secure. Just switching gears a little bit, I've known you for, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years maybe by now.
Yeah,
I don't
10
know
years.
what year it was. You came out to Uganda, so it was probably in Uganda I first met you, right? One of my, not a specific memory, but in general, what I remember about Taylor is the thing that will always stick in my mind is when she pick up the guitar and start singing. And I've never forgotten that. There's something special about it. And I would just sit back and sort of melt and listen to some worship song or something you were singing. So that's my earliest memory of Taylor is her and the guitar, and just the genuineness of that leading of worship. Now you've done, this sort of leads into some of the other things you've done. As you went to Bible school, you mentioned, then you started getting a few experiences, getting out of Canada and so on. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's funny. I definitely grew up, like I said, small town Newfoundland. Didn't have a passport until I graduated high school, and even a year after that, when I moved to Bible college, I think was when I finally got a passport. And I missed out, I think, in some ways on a lot of the experiences that a lot of Christian young people have, in the sense of youth camps and all of that. But I don't know if I just hit the road running when I went to Edmonton, or how that went. But I experiences just with courses at Vanguard, and a few different kind of cross-cultural experiences. The two that probably stick out to me the most would be coming to Uganda in 2012 was the year that we met. And I remember doing a few different things on that trip. And I remember listening to you and Sherilyn, and your guys' heart for ministry and heart for missions work, and the long-term view that you guys held, which was quite different than some of the experiences that or at that point, quite different than the little that I knew of missions work. But yeah, I have this memory of sitting on the floor of your first house in Uganda, and you standing up and sharing about L555, and I just remember being flabbergasted by what you had to say. I have no idea what you said at this point, but from then on, I was kind of like very intrigued about it. And we did a lot of really good stuff there. I remember some of the different ministry opportunities that we had, and all of a sudden my world was opened to cross-cultural ministry. And the reasoning I went on that trip in the first place was because I felt that after a year of Bible college, that I should switch from the youth program to the intercultural studies program, and this was kind of my test run. that was my pitch to my family, because of course I couldn't afford to go on my own. My pitch was, I think I need to switch to the missions program, and I should probably do something missions related before I do that. And so that was a big memory. And another thing that kind of shaped me in a lot of ways. In 2014, before I graduated, I got to do my internship in Honduras, working with Schools of Hope, and I worked with 4 missionaries there, and there was another girl that was kind of on a sabbatical from kids ministry, who ended up being the kind of the long-term missionary that's there now. And again, one of those experiences where you're kind of immersed in the world of another culture, learning and growing about ministry, and God is kind of just shaping you and showing you you know, where the future might be or where it might not be, and you know, being a part of another place and time, and well, not another time, but in some ways it kind of felt like it was. But yeah, those are some of the formative experiences that I had early on. Do you want me to kind of keep going, or you have another question?
No, go ahead. I know you have more.
Oh, I definitely do. Yeah, so of course I graduated from Vanguard, and I think probably one of the other formative experiences that I had, kind of before I started full time, you know, credentialed ministry here in Newfoundland. Well, two things. One of them is that I spent a year after graduating living in Edmonton, and also while I was going to school in Edmonton, I worked with a church plant in Edmonton, and I worked with Bob and Karen Cowie, and through that experience, I probably seen up to that point the most sacrificial ministry I've ever seen. I watched people who were willing to do whatever it took to accomplish what God had called them to do. It almost brings me to tears to think about it, because I watched them literally give me their car so that I could drive to St. Albert from Edmonton and get to where I was going to be in ministry. And when I say give me their car, they did better than give me their car. They loaned me their car and continued to pay for my insurance. So I mean, I was a student. They paid me a little bit for doing some work at the church, but they really showed me, you know, what it meant to be all in ministry, and being willing to trust God from the financial side of things, and being willing to trust God with everything. And I remember in the later days, there was kind of this group of us young adults, and every Sunday after church, we would go to their house for lunch. And sometimes it was fancier, sometimes it was simple. But there was just this deep sense of community and this deep sense of love among the church people. And that's something I think ever since I was there that I've probably longed for and wanted, because I knew, I didn't know what I had at the time. But now that I've moved on from that, I kind of long to have a space, or to create a space where that sense of community is found, and people understand kind of the way that works. Yeah, that was pretty formative for me.
Yeah, it's I have a couple of similar times when people sort of stepped out and believed in me in my younger years, and I'll never forget that. I'd like to use that to zero in a bit more on your passion for raising or training younger leaders, because I see what happened to you there as something that maybe you didn't even realize at the moment, but somebody was believing in you and sacrificing for you, and building into you. And in some ways, I think the what's lacking all over the world is for people to come around younger leaders before they're known as leaders, and really believe in them and help them grow. Just talk to us a little bit about that. Like, when did you start thinking about leadership and leaders?
I mean, I think it probably came up, you know, in small ways, but it's really hard to envision that when you're not really old enough to do that, or you feel that you're not old. Culture kind of dictates to you that you're not old enough to be a part of leading others. Yeah, I remember going into Arnold's Cove, so that would have been 20. I shouldn't have tried to list the date. I guess it would have been 2018, the fall of 2018. And I remember being fairly adamant going in that I would not be an advocate for women in ministry, that I was going in to do the work of ministry, and I was going in as a pastor. So at the time I was a woman, I was 25, and I was single. So, you know, 3 strikes, you're out in ministry. But I got the opportunity to be the pastor there, and I was pretty adamant that I wasn't going to be an advocate for other people. And Tia just commented saying, I remember that, because she would have been probably the one that I expressed that to. And then all of a sudden I realized somewhere along the way that my experience was the anomaly. I had a congregation that supported me unconditionally, that loved me, that allowed me to take risks and fail. Yet they trusted me. I had people twice my age who asked me for advice. People who confided in me as their pastor, and that doesn't make human sense. Yet God allowed that to happen. So I recognized that I was not the norm, because I had been put in a place where people accepted me. And it was then that I realized that I need to be an advocate for other people. I recognized that, I've been given this space, I've been given this opportunity that so many people don't get. And it was more about the church than it was about me. But now I need to in turn be that for someone else. I need to be able to give people a place where they can learn and grow, whether that's me actively, providing a safe space, or that's me actively training and helping and kind of educating and leading them in that way. But I really began to think about, especially other women in ministry and other people who were just starting, because that was my world at the time. Our small denomination, the Pentecostal Assemblies of Newfoundland and Labrador. So I really wanted to do what I could with a little bit of power that I had, and a little bit of influence that I had. I wanted to help, other people, and that really came to, I guess, its most fruitful time when I had the opportunity to have an intern come and be a part of ministry in Arnold's Cove, Arnold's Cove and Goobies and surrounding area. Her name was Sarah Lander. She's married now, Sarah March, and she felt that God was leading her to also be a lead pastor. And so she came alongside of me, and that would have been 2020, because we started ministry and then COVID hit. But it was through that experience that I was reminded how much I wanted to be able to impact others, and wanted to be able to help others grow in their leadership, and help others try things and fail in a safe space. And I'm sure that being my first time having an intern, and only time having an intern, dozens of things wrong, but I hope, and I like to think that she was able to grow and learn creative ways to do ministry in the midst of COVID, and enjoy her first experience, in the world of lead pastoring. So that's kind of how it started and how it developed. I think it kind of, peeked its head up a little bit prior to those moments, but those were definitely the moments when it was most solidified in me, because I got to experience it in working with her. And I also recognized finally that I'd been given an opportunity that a lot of people don't get. So I wanted to duplicate that for others.
Mm-hmm. Switch the angle a little bit and talk to us about why you feel leaders are needed in the first place. So it's one thing to say, okay, there's leaders around us, and how can we help them as they grow and develop and so on. But what would happen in the world if there weren't leaders, especially a new generation coming up as the older ones sort of, leave the scene? What role do leaders play? How would you define how God uses leaders in his church and mission today?
I think, if we talk about building God's kingdom, which is kind of how I've thought of this transition into working with L5, is that I'm trying to be the most effective I can for building God's kingdom. I think that we need leaders, because leaders are often the people who help others to build God's kingdom. I was just thinking, and maybe this is just because I heard this yesterday in church, but when I shared with the congregation, as well as when our pastor shared in the morning, we talked about Ephesians 5 and the fivefold ministry gifts, so the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher, and those people equip others for the work of ministry. And I think that we need leaders because we need to all be equipped for ministry. I look around our culture, especially in the West today, and people are, the church is declining, and I mean that as in the institutional church, but it also seems that, many Christians are walking away from faith. And I think we need those leaders who are willing to stand up and to equip people for the work of ministry, who are willing to stand up and lead the charge, and say, Jesus is good, even though society may come against us and say that and say that he's not. I believe that we truly do possess the faith that can change the world, and it's leaders who kind of raise up and lead that charge, and who begin to take other people along with them. And I think that's why we need leaders. Some people define leaders as just anybody who has influence. I think with L5, we maybe take it a little more specific, and we want to work with a specific type of leader. We want to work with catalytic leaders and those who kind of take the big changes and do the big things and move forward in kind of these crazy radical ways. But whether it's that average everyday person who has a little bit of influence, or it's the crazy leader who's doing something that nobody understands, to me, it's about building God's kingdom and being the best that we can and most effective we can in doing that. And that's why we need leaders, because there's a work to be done, and we need to get on board with that as much as we can.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You've touched on it already in your own context, but what would you say are some of the biggest challenges or factors that hold people back from pursuing leadership, or feeling, inside maybe that they could be a leader or want to be a leader, but just, end up sort of in the wasteland? I think all over the world there's a wasteland of would-be leaders that have been discouraged or sidelined, marginalized, and just sort of eventually give up, right? What are some of the factors that cause that to happen that we need to address?
Yeah, I think some of that you touched on already, Mark, from the identity piece, because I think if we're not secure in our identity in Christ and who he is, fear can really overwhelm us, especially if God has called us to something that is not conventional. And if God has called us to something that is different, that is outside of the box, that is taking a big risk. I think if our identity is not secure, it can be really tough to move into that world. And if I were to take an honest look at myself, I think some of the reason that I wrestled so long with being a part of Lead 555 is that I was so used to having my identity wrapped up in being the pastor of a small church, where people really made me feel like they valued me and really made me feel like they cared about me. And I think a part of my identity was wrapped up in that in an unhealthy way. And then when that was over, when I decided to resign from that, I do think that God had to do a work, and is still doing a work to make sure that that I have my identity in the right place, and that I'm able to fully trust in him and not trust in my role or my paycheck, or my, fill in the blank. So I think some of it is fear, for sure. I think that fear wraps up a lot of that for some people. I did have a second one, but after I started, I forgot what the second one was. It was
Okay.
good.
I'll give you a few seconds to think about that. Just want to acknowledge the other people that have joined us in the last few minutes here. And you can go back and listen to the recording later and catch the first part of this. Katie, I noticed your comment here, especially if our churches do not support those unconventional ways. And, in the history of the church, I mean, God has blessed us in so many ways, but we've also got locked into boxes and ways of thinking that are really man-made, and they have nothing to do with God, sadly to say. Just because it's church doesn't mean it's right. And sometimes as Christians, we end up worshiping the church, or we worship the Bible. We shouldn't worship the Bible. The Bible is God's word, and we should respect it, but we don't worship it. We only worship God and Jesus, our Savior. And we can get a lot of things mixed up, and in the process get some skewed ideas about what leadership is as well. So when we come to a place where some of us feel called to challenge some of that, it's not always going to be popular, and sometimes we'll get crucified figuratively because of those things. And that's why it's so important to have that fatherhood, that unconditional acceptance from our Father. This is great, Taylor. As we just go on to the next section here, I want to focus a little bit on L5, not necessarily on going into everything that L5 is. But what were some of your earliest, what made you stand up and take notice at some point and say, well, maybe that's something I might want to do, or people I might want to connect with in the future?
I think there's something that I think I've learned to call, and I did not come up with this term whatsoever, but there's something I think that exists that's called, or that I would call, holy discontentment. And that is, and what I mean by that is to look around at the world and to see where, simultaneously you try to see where God is working and the kingdom is growing, but you also, hold intention with that, what could be. The ways that God's kingdom could be extended more effectively, if we would make these changes, if we would see things a new way, if we would surrender or sacrifice our preferences, our desires, our wants, and put Him truly first. So I think in hearing about L5 and hearing just words like catalytic and not really knowing what they meant, but then figuring it out and learning, about the idea that L5 exists to help change agents really make the change in their world that they feel called to make. That kind of, it really drew me in. It really pulled me in because seeing that or being discontent with the way that things are around me, and recognizing that God, I think, longs to do really transformative things, in my world, and as I go to different places and see the opportunities for God to move. So just having the big picture conversations around change and the process of change, and really having a glimpse into what God can do, and how God can work if we would just be on board with that, and we would just have the support system in place to do that. That just gets me really excited. And so, whether it was in 2012 or, whether it was seeing what you were doing when I was with your family in 2015, 2016, or just kind of sneaking in on your newsletter videos, kind of in the background, lurking for a few years. I always got really excited about what was happening because I knew that it was really transformative change. And I knew that, God's kingdom could be built more effectively if we would kind of gather together in a cohort format or some format, and in community discover the ways that we can build the kingdom.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was just going to mention earlier, and I forgot to bring it up, and that's that, as much as we realize that we need to be able to be willing to go at things alone and have our only foundation being Jesus and being this relationship with God the Father, we're still human, and in most cases, God calls people to go through life and go through change together with others. And we're more effective. We're more likely to succeed. We're more likely to stick to our changes when we have support, when we have friends around, when we do it in teams and in families. And in fact, even as we share the gospel with people, they're more likely to stick to it and to follow through with a transformative gospel if they do it as families. And in the West, we tend to be so highly individualized. Everything's personal decision for Christ. Everything, it's only about you. And there is a level of that where you have your own individual responsibility to make those choices. But really, it's a very unique thing to the West that we make it so individualized. And I think we've lost something when we do it that way. And that's one thing we believe in L5 is that whether it's us as staff and a team, we need to go at it together because it's often going to be very difficult. But also as we work with people, we work in cohorts and we work in communities, because the changes that we're asking people to make, the deep fundamental paradigm shifts in what leadership is, what discipleship is, and what it means to follow God are difficult. They're big shifts, right? Jesus called us to some pretty radical changes. And he himself was a radical. One of the books that we use is called Transforming Leadership. And they quote there another fellow who I don't have the quote in front of me right now, but he says, Jesus was a courteous rebel. He was a rebel by almost all definitions. He rocked things. And he was courteous, though, about it. He wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but he knew that he had to obey the Father rather than just submit to the religious expectations of the day. And that takes courage in knowing who you are. So yeah, going at this together is going to be so important. Talk to us a little bit about how you see your role. Like what aspects of your role? I know we've had a few discussions about this, and it's not the kind of thing where we hand you a very specific job description and that's exactly what you're going to do. This is a bit of a crazy journey that we're all on, but there's some things that I hope excite you about your role. What are some of those things that you say, okay, I can't wait to sink my teeth into that?
Yeah, I think pretty early on, Mark, in one of the many conversations we had before I kind of leapt on board, I remember saying something like, if you give me a job description and tell me exactly what to do, I'll die. I won't survive. Just because that's not how God's wired me. And it's fine if you are wired that way, but he's chosen to wire me differently. And one of the things that I think really excites me about, L5 is that there's that room and that ability to sit as a team and say, as the people who are working in a specific area, and to say, okay, where are we going? What is going on? And to kind of vision cast and plan. And that's probably one of the things I'm looking forward to. Well, there's two things I'm looking forward to. In the long term, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to being able to, once I get a kind of a clear picture of how things run here, to be able to sit down and say, okay, how do we take what is in place for leaders today? How do we change that, tweak it, and how do we now apply it to the next generation of leaders? Because people may not know, I talk about, working with younger leaders, but right now L5 works with leaders who are a little bit older, at least in the current cohorts that I've seen. So how do we now take that and apply that to younger leaders, which I know is your heart and is mine as well. So I'm really looking forward to that in the long run, because, the big picture kind of conversations are where I love to be. Even if I'm just listening, I just love to be kind of at the table and vision cast and see what we can dream about and see where God is leading us. In a sort of immediate sense, I really feel like, this fall, I'm just kind of, I don't know if I should say I'm submitting myself to the process, but I feel like I'm jumping into two cohorts that I don't know much about, and I'm going really to learn. And I know that, I may be educated in some sense, institutionally educated, but I'm just beginning to learn this model and this process. And I'm really excited to see one cohort that's, nearing the end, and then to see another cohort, in Europe that's kind of just starting out, and to see for myself what I've been hearing all along, and to see how God is working through those experiences. So yeah, that's kind of the short and long term. Those are some of the things that are exciting me. I can't wait to get on the ground and see, how this thing runs firsthand. I've kind of been on the sidelines for a while, but I'm excited to get in and see and learn and see, how this thing runs.
We'll circle back to that in a second. I just wanted to add a little bit to your comments about process. In one of the principles we teach is a principle of co-creation, in that if you tell somebody what to do, it's your idea and you're getting somebody else to do your idea. But if you go on this journey of discovery together, that sets the stage for ownership. And ownership ultimately is the fundamental beginning point for sustainability. We all talk about sustainability in the world, in the environment, or in missions, or whatever. But really, to get to that point of sustainability, we need to have this process of all of us, everyone involved, all the stakeholders, being involved in developing and in building something. And I learned that, I don't know if you remember back when you first visited us in Uganda, the most fun and easiest mode of transportation is the motorcycle taxis that they call boda bodas in Uganda. It's no helmets, nothing. You zip around traffic, and they're on every street corner. There's literally thousands and thousands of them. And I had this one guy named Martin that I used to use and try to use the same guy because it's a little bit safer. And he had this little 100cc motorcycle. They're all the same. They're almost identical, except his was like, it looked brand new. And I commented to him and I said, "Hey, Martin, you have a brand new bike. How long have you had this new bike?" And he said, "Oh no, it's not new. It's 3 years old." I said, "Come on, it looks brand new. Look at these other ones. They're falling apart, and your leg touches the exhaust and you get burned, and it's pretty sketchy riding some of these." And he said, "No, a lot of these guys, they drive for somebody else. The bike isn't theirs, but this is my bike." And so when he would take me somewhere and ask him to wait for a few minutes, he'd be out there with a cloth, cleaning it and wiping it and so on. And I'll never forget that, because it's the principle of ownership. He took care of what was his. He owned it. And sustainability comes down to us owning things, including the visions. Do we own the vision? We'll follow that. We'll give our lives to a vision if we feel like it's our vision, but we're not going to give our life for somebody else's vision. And so co-creation is so important. And that's what, Taylor, we want you to experience at L5 too, is that as we grow here, it's not just you coming along to be an employee to, deliver programs that L5 has developed, but to come along and to co-create, develop new things together that become part of your heart. This becomes you as you join this team. Just a bit more on tell us about a little bit more. You touched on it, but I want you to go a little deeper into what you're doing this fall.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is kind of where people are probably wondering kind of what's going on. So basically, on September 23rd, I set off. The base for the fall will be Greece, which is where you are located now, Mark. For anybody who didn't hear his introduction, Mark is Canadian but lives in Greece with his family. So I'll be joining you folks there and learning the ropes there. But I'll also be going to the Amazon as well as a Balkan country to take in those cohorts that are happening there. So I'll be doing a bit of going in the sense of moving around and getting a feeling, but the gist of it again, and Mark, I'm just trying to get on board. So you can correct me. Maybe you have more plans than I know about, but from this point, it's from my perspective anyway. It's really just about learning the ropes and seeing what's going on, and walking into one of the last trainings in Peru and seeing how this whole thing is wrapping up, and to talk with some of the people whose lives have been changed, and then to go into the Balkan country as well, and see what's going on there, and really just get my feet wet and dive in, because like you've said to me several times, there's really no other way to really understand until you see it, until you live it, until you jump into it. So, as many hours as we've talked, as many hours as the team has talked, and I've been a part of that, I think, there's some things you can't really understand until you're really there on the ground, seeing it in front of you and experiencing, those moments where people's lives are being transformed, and they kind of see those aha moments where those mind shifts are happening and paradigm shifts are happening. So yeah, for me, it's more about exposure and kind of getting my feet wet, and then moving from there.
Just to add a little bit to what Taylor's saying, Taylor's going to be in Peru in September in a place called Puerto Maldonado. And we've moved around from Bogota, Colombia to Peru, but it's all the same group. It's specially chosen about 30 leaders that represent the key networks of indigenous and national and international organizations and churches that are focused on reaching the 667 tribes of the Amazon. So it's a phenomenal opportunity that God has given us to walk a journey with these people, not only to do leadership training of those 30, but to help them develop some strategies and models that will work in the Amazon itself. We don't know the culture and the way of living in the Amazon to go directly in there and do the training. We shouldn't do that, but we can work with bridge people who can do that. So that's the group that we're working with. The L505 material, it's almost impossible to teach people how to teach it. Taylor's been asking me to send her everything I can. And I sort of have, and she probably looks at it and says, "Hey, is this all there is to it? There's not much here. Give me more, give me more." But it's almost impossible to actually do it on paper or using files. You have to be there. And that's why we're going to make sure that Taylor gets to every opportunity possible to sort of learn on the job, in a sense. So we'll be there. We'll also be in the Balkans, working with another team that is struggling. I mean, they were desperate because they were using models of discipleship making that in other places have been working very effectively, but in the Balkans was not working. It just simply was failing. And God's called us to work with this group to help sort of recreate, to re-strategize how to reach this country. So it's an exciting time there. Some beautiful younger leaders there that we can that we've been given the privilege of working with. So that'll be at end of September and into October that we'll be there. Just wanted to touch on one of the comments that I think it's Katie was asking here, what's considered younger. That's always a debate in us, and especially, when I was in my 20s, young was 20 or younger, right? And then when you get into your 40s, young is sort of 40, the new young. Yeah, that's a good question. Taylor, what do you think young is? Who are the younger leaders? What age are we talking about?
I mean, I think when I think of younger, I think about people who are, it starts with people who are just kind of starting out in their ministry or in whatever area of passion that they have. So, I would think it could be as young as 18, probably more likely, 22, because especially in the ministry world or business world, people are, going to university or college first. I think I'm maybe just getting to that age now where I can consider someone else younger. I'm 30 years old, but I would like to think, that it goes even older than I am, because I think, a lot of people, especially in the ministry world, they come to ministry later in life. And so I wouldn't want to exclude anybody from being younger. And in this world, I kind of almost think about it as new to ministry, or new to the ministry that we're helping work with them in. I don't want to put a number on it, maybe 35 and under. But I see that the Reverend Neil Buffett says energetic and motivated. So under that parameter, Reverend Neil, I think maybe you would still qualify, and I don't consider you young. So if he could respond, he'd say some sarcastic remark, but he can't. So
yeah, I know exactly this debate. As I've grown older, I've started to use the word emerging leader, and because I've seen people, in their 60s or whatever, starting to come alive and realize, hey, I've been in a box all my life and there's so much more to learn, and they start to come alive. So it's almost like they're at a phase of life of many younger leaders, but they happen to be older, and that's okay. Having said that, I don't want that to always be the definition of younger leader. We do need to intentionally, deliberately look for special ways of recognizing leaders in their 20s who haven't had a chance to sort of get noticed. But we need to create new ways of noticing and coming around those people and allowing them to make mistakes and learn and so on. And I would even go earlier, and that's not something we're doing right now, but at some point I would love to see ways of working with high schoolers, just beginning to plant those seeds in them. I was a teen when I started to think about leadership, a young teen. And I don't think it's too early, but it does take a special sort of strategy, a different strategy to work with them. So who knows, down the road, if some of you feel called to that, get in touch. I just want to start to wrap up here. I know we've been going for a while now, so just a couple of things. What are some of the things that scare you about going into this part of your life journey?
Yeah, I think there's a certain vulnerability that comes with this line of work in a couple of ways. I think there is a financial vulnerability that comes with this, and a new level of trust in God that God will provide. And that scared me more a few weeks ago than it does now. I think that in your head you have expectations that things will happen a certain way, and when they don't, you can get really scared when God doesn't unfold the future the way that you expect him to. It gets a bit scary. So I definitely had some big moments of fear and shed several tears about that one. I think there's another area though that kind of scares me. And again, this is probably comes back to the identity piece and what God is doing kind of in my life and the core of who I am. There's this fear of stepping out and failing. This fear of stepping out outside of, I'm an ordained pastor with the Pentecostal Assemblies of Newfoundland. But of course, L5 is not a Pentecostal Assemblies of Newfoundland initiative or ministry. So there's a certain level of faith that comes with stepping outside of the covering you're used to in some sense. I mean, I'll still be an ordained pastor, whatnot, but to step out into something that is not designed to be, nor it should be designed to be, an established organization in the sense of, this is the way we are, and this is how we do things. This is how we will do things for 50 years, and all of that. So stepping out into something that is open to change and growth is a little scary, because it's not what you're used to. And even though when I would say I love change more than most people. I would say I'm less scared of risk than most people. There's still that sense that I knew what I was supposed to do every week in Arnold's Cove. I knew what was expected, and anything above and beyond that was great. But I knew that if I showed up on Sunday and I showed up on Wednesdays, then the people would be happy. And now it's like, okay, I'm going into a world where what is expected, where am I going? And it's relying on God in a way that I'm not used to. And it requires a new level of trust. And as rewarding as I'm sure that will be, it's scary in the short term. It's scary maybe it's scary forever, but I think it's worth it, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, this has been really good, Taylor. What I'm going to do is in a couple of minutes, I'm going to come back and ask you how we can pray for you. So be ready for that. But while you're thinking about that, I just want to, on behalf of Taylor, she wouldn't say these things about herself, but if you'll allow me, and I know you have a great fan club here, and these people are probably very protective of you, Taylor, and they want to make sure you're going somewhere safe and somewhere good. And we're going to try to do the best we can to take care of her. We've known Taylor for 10 plus years, and we value her tremendously. Joining L555, you need to be a unique person. You need to be a special person. We don't just take anyone. And so Taylor fits that description. Taylor is in the process of going through something very difficult right now, and that is raising money. As you know, it's become harder and harder for mission-focused people to raise money. The whole culture in Canada and the US and in the West has changed, whereas it used to be a standard thing, and you sort of expect it, and there was always opportunity for that. It's become very, very difficult because I don't know. We won't go into all the reasons for that, but I'm challenging many people wherever I go that there's an opportunity for people to get behind Taylor, both prayerfully and financially, is to realize that Taylor is a rare opportunity to invest in something that I would call, from an investment for you people that invest money, it's a highly leveraged opportunity to support one person and create a huge impact in the world. I mean, I can't think of a better person to support, someone who is going into a very strategic kind of leadership training, leadership development in a context where that is going to be multiplied and create a huge impact in the world. So if you're at all thinking about this or able to support Taylor in a financial way, just prayerfully consider that, because you're multiplying your dollars. You can give your dollars to many good causes, and you should. But if you want a cause that will multiply your dollars tremendously, then don't look beyond Taylor. Taylor's your person for that. And you do that simply by going to lead555.com, find the donate button, and Taylor's name is in there. And you can take it from there. It's all tax deductible and so on. But more than the money, what is important is that Taylor has a family around her, not just the one she'll work with every day here in L5, but one that is sort of back home, thinking about her, calling her, encouraging her, asking her, how can we pray for you? Don't wait for her newsletters. Once in a while, get on your text or whatever and say, what's going on today? What do you need from me today? That's the kind of friends that Taylor will need through the ups and downs that this journey will take her through. So I really appreciate all of you taking the time to be here to encourage her. Taylor, tell us a little bit about how we can pray for you.
Yeah, I think as time goes on, I'm kind of settling into the reality. If you asked me a few weeks ago, I probably would have asked for peace because I was stressed. But God has a way of working that stuff out. But I guess continued peace would be really wonderful, because I'm sure I'll hit some roadblocks along the way. But also, I'm the type of person that and it's one of those things that I remember way back in 2014 on my internship. I was sitting in the office in Honduras, and I was like, why aren't we doing something? We should be always going and doing something. And my internship supervisor, her name is Judy Lundrigan, and she said to me something to the effect of, sometimes you just need to be, and it's not always about doing. And I think my biggest prayer is I think working alongside folks like you, Mark, and the whole team, I think we all think pretty big and we all think pretty strategically. So, I believe that we need to pray about that. But for me personally, I would really like prayer just for myself, that I would learn to be. I know I'm kind of in a lull and in a transition season right now. So, but I know that as soon as I get there and as soon as we start, it's going to be a run. There's going to be lots to but in the midst of that, the most effective way I can do any of that is if at the core of who I am, in tune with God, in tune with the Holy Spirit, and I'm able to just be in God's presence. So maybe that's a weird prayer request, but for me, that's where I need to be. And, when I get in ministry, sometimes I find myself not as focused on those elements as I am on the doing.
Right. So
I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person that runs and then thinks about, prayer later, or, just that God would continue to mold me and shape me in this season as I prepare to go, and that I would just be. I think, the doing I'm not super stressed about, but the being, I need God to continue to work on my heart and help me grow. So that's where I could use some prayers.
All right. Any last words that you'd like to say to your friends?
Thank you, guys. I was wondering today, I was like, how many people are going to show up? And then when the timer started, I thought, oh my goodness, nobody's going to show up. And I thought, if we get 20, that's really good. And so, we're sitting at over 30 now. So I appreciate all you folks who joined, who listened, who stuck around for all of this. It's been a while. This was not a short conversation. So I appreciate that so much. And I appreciate all the people who have just kind of poured into my life along the way. Thank you, Pastor Jamie, for being the president of the fan club. Appreciate that. And Pastor Luff and Dina, you guys have been a great support, and anybody who's watching, I just appreciate your support along the way. And I like Mark said, I want to keep connected, and I want to hopefully use what I learned to be able to bless you and to bless those that are tuned in and listening or receiving newsletters or whatever. I think it's important that I can do what I can to help you out too. So, yeah.
Well, Taylor, it's been really fantastic doing this. To all of those who are supporting Taylor, please take initiative. Don't make her always reach out to you. Call her, how can we pray? Ask her how much more money she needs. Ask her what her highlights for the week were, what her highs and lows, like we used to do in our family around the kitchen table. What are your highs and lows this week? And we'd force the kids to do it, right? And then, but it would start really good conversations. So please do that with Taylor, and be her family, be her active family, and glorify God through that. So thank you for joining us. I think we should do this again sometime, every 3 months or something. Just do another live stream, get everybody together, and sort of have an update, have a conversation, chat about it a bit. So I'm game if you guys are, but you can try that.
I think that you're on the hot seat next time.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, it's all together. So thank you. I'll let you close out however we do this. Taylor?
Yeah. I'm the technology behind it. So yeah, I just have to push a button. So thanks, guys. It's been really good. And like you said, Mark, let's do it again.
Thank you.